and the southern France, 55,000 years. The second oldest cultural oasis in Europe is the Balkan and Bosnia, and Bosnian pyramids are exactly in the middle of the Balkan Peninsula, 38,000
Whoa.
years. And the third oldest, Ukraine, around the Black Sea, about 28,000. But from the late 1990s, we learned that there was a communication between Asia and South America. And this is important because of both Lemurian motherland Mu, because at that time there were many more bigger islands than what we have today. So people were able to move uh, much easier than today between those islands. So what we are finding out that 55,000 years back is when the human remains originate in South America, which is
Did they
totally
find bodies, or is that based
yeah.
on
No, no, no,
legends?
no. The way you do it with the the way you do it through DNA and the haplogroups. Haplogroups. So basically, descendants, even people who live there now in Peru, Colombia, and those countries, they have this gene. They have the haplogroup, which we can trace back 55,000 years, and that would be the phase.
OMG.
That would be
Is this in
phase of
Brazil
the
too? Would that
yeah,
be
yeah,
Brazil?
the whole Southern America. I mean, in Brazil, of course, we have pyramids hidden in Amazon, in the jungles, and I mean, this country is totally, untouched archaeologically. So, like I said, based on uh, certain scientific research, some geological, some DNA, and some other records, we can be very confident and claim that in last 100,000 years we did have very advanced civilizations. And
So
now
we
you
can
briefly
count Mu. We can count Motherland Mu forward then.
Madeleine Moore, of course, but then I would say it goes even deeper in the past, and it is questionable. Are we talking only about the physical aspect? I would say that was a transition phase when our grandfathers were moving from the spiritual aspect in a lower physical aspects. They wanted to experience the material world through the physical senses. So probably there's the reason why you cannot really find any of the physical remains or you know. However, Pacific is still untouched when it comes to very serious archaeological research. Even places like Easter Island, the stories that the primitive local people from this island were able to move and carve and transport and erect those 375-ton heads and bodies is of course unbelievable. And they are saying they used only the primitive stone tools. Again, it is impossible to shape those beautiful heads on this island, which is in the middle of nowhere. I mean, we're talking 5,000 kilometers away from South America, 10,000 kilometers away from Tahiti, and then plus they had the megalithic walls, they have stone spheres, and they have rondo rondo writing. I mean, only on this island, all other Pacific islands, you know, they had nothing. So it seemed that it was some kind of the episode. Probably somebody landed there, stayed for some time, and then left. And our
Was that
planet
the
is full
giants?
of such.
Do you?
Hmm?
I know you have to have scientific proof, but was that at least in legends? Was that giants from? We call them extraterrestrials, regardless of the part of the cosmos they come from. But could they have landed here? I can't prove it, but I've heard stories in our Ace Folklife Society about giants
Well,
came and
giants
went.
have been mentioned all over the planet, and
Okay.
they are in oral stories everywhere. It can be India, it can be Africa, it can be North America. And let me remind you on a time when Smithsonian Institute was established. That was the second half of the 19th century. And the first assignment their teams had was to destroy mounds all over the United States of America and get all the artifacts, bodies, bones from out of there. Those mounds, uh, some of them are very significant in size. We call them in archaeology the tumulus. Now, tumulus is an artificial conical hill. There are thousands of them. Today, there are few of them, and they are, equally significant and impressive. For example, Cahokia National Park in the state of Illinois is a home for more than 120 pyramids. They call them mounds. They're actually pyramids. And I read an interview which was published in 1884 in Chicago Tribune, where the journalist was asking the head of the Smithsonian team about their assignments. They said, well, we have to destroy those mounds. We have to retrieve all the archaeological material, get it to Smithsonian. And what happened there? It seems that they were finding the bones of those giants because some of them were like 12 feet, 14 feet, or even 20 feet in size. And, today we know nothing about them. And
well,
it
isn't that
seems
how
that,
the giants were built in Egypt? Those statues are said to be exact replicas of beings.
okay, now this,
my.
okay, this,
Uh-huh.
this is a very good question. I will answer that question also. Let me finish with the Smithsonian. So what
Yes.
happened from the end of the 19th century, all this material ended up in the basements of Smithsonian institutes, never to be seen by the public. So
Oh,
99% of their artifacts are actually hidden and they are not exposed to us. So what they show,
okay.
1%, is really irrelevant. When it
Like
comes to
Indiana
Egypt,
Jones movies, they throw them in the Pentagon down in the
you know,
basement somewhere.
you know what? That last scene is exactly what's been happening. So when they show something like that in the fiction movie, you would say it's a fiction. When somebody shows up, start talking about it, they say, "Oh no, this is just a fiction from Indiana Jones movie." I mean, the elites are very smart. They
Smart,
they
yes.
master the deceptions. Now you asked me about the Egypt. About Egypt, of course, the stories that we heard from Egyptologists are really nothing but the bedtime stories about the pharaohs of the fourth dynasty building those pyramids with the 100,000 slaves. Well, wait a minute. Some of those blocks, like the biggest one in Khafre's pyramid, the second largest, is 220 ton. It's a granite block coming from Aswan from 500 miles to the south. How did they move 220 tons? I mean,
Giants.
220 tons,
Bigger
it's
people.
almost 500,000 pounds, half a million pounds. No way that they had technology to transport. They did not even have a wheel. When the Japanese tried to make a replica of the whole trip, they made just 2 ton block, 2 ton. They made a replica of little barge, little boats that they could see on hieroglyphic writings, and the boat sunk with a 2 ton block. How to explain 220, 100 times bigger and heavier? So obviously it was not ancient pharaohs, as you know them, who are builders of those pyramids. And you asked if some of those statues do show the giants. Well, again, let's invite science in help. The most important document from Egypt is actually not in Egypt, it is in Italy, in the Egyptian Museum in Turin. It is called the Turin King List, and it is on display. It's been there from 1820. At that time, Turin was part of France, and the French consul, he got it on auction in Cairo. He brought it to then French, today Italy. And on this uh, papyrus, which is very long, all Egyptian rulers are listed in 11 columns. The last 9 columns are the third phase in Egyptian history. This phase is called Sons of Gods. Sons of
Wow.
Gods, Sons of Gods is what Egyptian pharaohs called themselves. They did not use term pharaoh, it is from ancient Greece, from 2,000 years ago. It has nothing to do with those rulers or kings. They call themselves sons of gods. And
so the
some of
language
those
has changed as well, right? The way
yeah,
we talk, the way we think, our cultures,
exactly.
our traditions, we don't even
Yeah.
relate the same thoughts that they did back then, much less
We
have
don't.
words to match.
Now, those sons of gods, they are actually Homo sapiens. They are like you and I. So, those sons of God, some of them would rule Egypt 2 years, like King Tut, King Tutankhamun. Some of them 67 years, like Ramesses II. But they were humans. Now, the phase before this one, and this one started 5,100 years back with the king Menem who united Lower and Upper Egypt. Well, the phase before that was the phase of demigods or semi-gods or mythical kings. Now, those
Okay.
demigods, they would rule Egypt 200, 300, or 400 years each. Each. So imagine how long they could live. And the phase before this one is the phase of gods who descended from the sky to Egypt and who ruled Egypt. The last two phases, demigods and gods, lasted 36,620 years. And when you add 5,100 years of the third phase, sons of gods, we are talking 41,000 years. So, if we want to know the real history of Egypt, we would need to go back for 40,000 years. And if we want to know the true builders of the biggest and the most superior Egyptian pyramids, go back 40,000 years ago. The Sphinx, 40,000 years. The beginning of Luxor and Karnak with those huge obelisks reaching 375 tons. Again, gods and demigods. Abu Simbel, those four huge statues, and you go there, the tourist guide will tell you, oh, this is Ramesses II, Ramesses the Conqueror, the most magnificent ruler, blah, blah, blah. However, you look at those faces, you can see four different faces. It is not one person. So everything they tell us really about the ancient history is wrong. And yes, some of those beings, they were very beautiful, by the way. They were, hominids. When you look at them, I would say yes, they were much bigger than us. They were the true giants. And then when you travel the rest of the Middle East, for example, you go to northern Israel, beautiful fortress, they call it Nimrod fortress. Then you go to eastern Turkey, one interesting mountain. On the top of the mountain, somebody dropped 75,000 tons of ground rocks. Rocks are like 2-3 inches radius. So somebody ground the rocks and they dropped them probably from some type of a spaceship on the top of the mountain. And the rocks, they formed a tumulus, conical, hill. They call this mountain in Turkish language Nemrut mountain, or it is Nimrod mountain. You go to Syria, Nimrod fortresses. You go to Iraq, Nimrod. Nimrod is everywhere. And who's Nimrod? Nimrod was a giant according to the legends. So it was a person, a man, so big, so powerful, so it seems that the stories about the giants are omnipresent. I mean, you go to Sardinia in Italy, you go to India, you go to different places. However, there is another extreme, very small people. Now, we know, for example, that in Tibet, it seems that a long time ago, some people landed there. They could not go back to their homes, wherever it was, and they looked like people, like humans, but they were not humans. Or another case, in 1967, the Chinese archaeologist was having a conference in Japan, and he said that 200 pyramids were discovered. He found clay tablets, and then he said that he partially deciphered this clay tablet. And the tablet described a spaceship who, after the cosmic accident, ended up on our planet. It was in irreparable state. They could not repair it. They had to stay on the planet, and they continued traditions from their